All right, man, we've been over this like a dozen times, and I just don't see why you don't get it. Evil Dead 2 is not really a sequel. It's a remake.
No, it's not. Your first hint should be the 2 after. It is absolutely a sequel.
If it's a sequel, then we're meant to believe that he went back to the same cabin twice with 2 different women.
When I was single, I would have gone to a bunch of cabins with a bunch of women, even if it was the same thing. He's not an idiot. He's going to go back to that cabin with women.
You want to talk about cabins and women? Hey, baby.
Actually, guys, I've got one. Orca 2, the wailing. And here's the tagline. Wail, wail, wail.
Oh, so bad.
Oh, well, it's time for us to start recording.
Good.
Welcome to MonsterKid Fury. Joining me today is Rick from Film Fury.
Hello again.
And Rich from MonsterKid Central.
Howdy.
And this will be Sequels Volume 1, the liked list. Take it away, Rick.
Before you do, I wanted to show you something. This is kind of like my new mascot, although it's not a cat, but my friend Dawn Kitley made this for me. And specifically made it so it could be up there for the podcast. So when you see me, you'll see this.
I love it.
Yeah, it's very cool. But anyway, go ahead, Rick.
Okay, so we're here doing sequels this episode. And I don't know about you, this list was much more difficult than the remakes for me.
Absolutely.
I had to do so many Sophie's choices. It's ridiculous. I would have had to have a family of like 500. Basically, I'm like, okay, you're going away. Yeah,
I'm with you 100%.
Yeah. So, do you want to start, or you should start?
Okay. All
Age
right.
before.
How lovely. Okay, so I am going with what I'm sure you'll be the happiest with. Alien 3.
Nice.
I love Alien 3. In fact, I like it better than Alien 2. Aliens.
Really? Wow.
And the reason for that is the armed forces, I cannot take the way that they talk. The Marine kind of talk seems so dated to me now. Right. Let's go fuck them up kind of thing. It's like, oh, geez, really? It reeks of Cobra. And I know that you like Cobra. I'm not cutting on it. I'm just saying that the dialogue seems really stilted. And I always thought Alien 3 was a really interesting take on it. And anytime they can work in religion and science fiction into one thing, because they seem to fight with each other so much, I'm intrigued. So yeah, I know I'm not gonna get any make any friends on this one, but and I'm also a David Fincher fan. So I was really surprised with how much I enjoyed part 3. I think they really took some risks.
I've always loved Alien 3. Like from the first time I saw it in the theater. You know, I came out of it with a bunch of friends because I was just out of high school, and they were just like, "Oh, it's horrible compared to Aliens." I'm like, "No, it's its own thing." You didn't want to walk in and see Aliens all over again. You didn't want to see Space Marines and all. You wanted to see what the next chapter would be. Right. And I think Fincher and Weaver working together, because she was co-producer for that one.
Yeah,
I think they were able to craft a really fine movie. Now, I will say, the director's cut, which is on the Blu-ray set, is a superior movie. It's a much better movie than the theatrical version.
I agree completely. But yeah, I've always had a thing for it, and I'm pleasantly surprised that you feel the same. So
yeah. Interesting though, that movie nearly killed David Fincher in terms of he seriously thought about walking away from directing films after that because he was just getting so much grief from 20th Century Fox.
Right. But the thing is, it's the whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think it probably helped prepare him for his future.
Oh, absolutely. See, and the thing is with the Alien sequels, there's really not a bad one per se. Like even Alien Resurrection, which is probably my least favorite. It's still an Alien movie. It's still enjoyable.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you 100% on that. It's like it's kind of in a way the opposite of what we said about if I'm familiar with the crew of the Enterprise, I feel better. If I'm familiar with if I'm familiar with the setup and the bad guy and everything else like Alien sequels, I'm good with that. You know,
Yeah,
I mean, if there's a plot, even better, but I mean, I could just sit there and watch them. So, but yeah, so anyway, Alien 3 for me.
All right, that was a surprise, definitely.
Thank
Do
you.
you have comments on Alien 3 up there, moderator?
I liked it. It did have really scary moments.
Mm-hmm.
I still feel like Ripley's involvement with the alien. Is it a xenomorph?
Yep.
Yes.
With the xenomorph or morphs is pretty on point.
I think my favorite part of this Alien was that it came from the bull, so it ran on all fours, which I thought was really great.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. This one,
and you had Charles C. Dutton. You had from Rock. He was great.
Great actor.
I love the concept of his character.
Yeah.
I have to re-educate the brothers.
Yeah, good stuff.
Okay, so that's your first choice. Might as well just do this one. Aliens. That was my choice.
Okay, cool.
My first choice on my list was Aliens. Such an outstanding movie in the sense that they took what Ridley Scott did in the first one with a single alien, and they're like, well, in fact, the rumor, the legend of Hollywood is that when Cameron came in for the pitch meeting, he stood before these people at Fox and he wrote Alien, and then at the end he put a dollar sign. So Alien.
Oh, that's funny.
Which I thought was great. And he was like, yes, we're just going to have mad aliens everywhere. And they're just like, okay, go with it. Yeah, it's also an interesting counterpart to Rambo First Blood Part 2, which he wrote at the same time as Aliens. So you have a lot of that gung-ho Americana, right. We're going to get the bad guys kind of feel to it.
Right.
Yeah. I think it's the perfect combination of how editing and the score can come together. Every time I watch it and they're escaping and you have that driving James Horner score, I love that moment. And I'm excited every time I see it. I know what's going to happen, but it just plays out so well. It really is. It's just such a great sequence.
Well, I like Aliens quite a bit. Just because I like Alien 3 better doesn't diminish Aliens at all. It's got some great stuff in it, some iconic stuff in it. I mean, anybody who gets in that that contraption that Ridley gets in, I mean, that brings the whole movie back.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Now, was it just me, or when you see the sequence when Ripley goes into the Queen's lair, and she suddenly finds herself, she's holding Newt, and she finds herself in the middle of all the eggs and everything, and she's trying to quietly sneak out.
Yeah,
that I found so reminiscent of the finale of The Birds, when they come out and the birds are just everywhere, and he's holding the kid, and they're slowly walking through it. And I keep wondering if Cameron had that in mind when he did that scene by chance.
Well, I never thought of that, but yeah, you're dead on. That's exactly what it could be. It could be an homage uh, to the birds. Um, because yeah, you're right. I mean, I'm shocked at that I never realized that. But thank God I've got you. If I don't, you can come
I
up with
think
it.
I think the other part that I love about Alien so much is Paul Reiser. He's one of my favorite actors anyways in comedy. And
Right,
here he's just an asshole. He's just the worst horrible person. He is the face of the corporation.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was great too because when I saw him, I thought, oh well, this is going to be a lighthearted romp. Yeah, not so
Mhm.
much. Yeah,
Yeah.
he is great. I mean, he's and I think um underutilized. I would actually like to have seen more of him.
I know. And unfortunately he's at that point where he's probably had the best of his years, as an actor, it's unfortunately gone. But another bit of Hollywood lore that I've heard or that I read about once was that the sequence when Ripley throws him against the wall,
Yeah,
when he says, I thought you'd be smarter about this, Ripley. Apparently, the thrown against the wall part was not in the script. It wasn't planned. That was Sigourney and Cameron spoke about it. And Cameron's like, just grab him and just pin him to the fucking wall. Go at him. And you can kind of see it. If you look
right,
at Paul Reiser's face, that's either really good acting or he was like, oh, fuck, I was not expecting that.
right, right,
And I love, because even when she walks away, he's trying to calm himself down, and I thought you would be smarter than this,
yeah.
I'm sorry to disappoint you.
God, that's great. I think that's great. Poor Paul, though.
And then
Got a
Yeah.
great
another
performance
issue.
though.
Oh
Yes.
yeah, yeah. Now, do you think the character of oh my god, I'm blanking on his name. Not Hudson. Hudson was Bill Paxton. Michael
Right.
Bean's character.
Oh yeah. Jeez.
Hicks. Corporal Hicks.
Hicks.
There you go. Do you think that performance would have been just as good or better with the original actor, which was
Yeah.
his name is escaping me, but he played Harry's dad on Dexter, and he was
Oh,
in
that guy.
in the Warriors.
Yeah.
He was originally cast as
Remar.
Hicks. James Remar. There you go. He was originally cast, but Cameron had to replace him because apparently Remar had a huge drug and alcohol problem, and he just wasn't bringing his A game. So
Right.
Cameron let him go. And Michael Bean jumped on a plane like within an hour's notice, and literally when he landed, he was shooting his first scenes.
Wow. It's really tough to after an actor has put his performance on screen, it's been edited down, there's
Mm,
music behind it and everything. It's very tough to then say, gee, I wonder if John Smith could have done this.
right.
Or how I don't know because I don't even have a guess. If we
Mm,
took a really good actor and a really bad actor and gave me the choice there, maybe, but
right.
they're both good actors. So I have no idea. I really don't have a clue. Um, how do you feel about it?
What I find interesting about Bean's performance that I don't think Remar would have done for a Marine, he's very quiet and reserved. He never really loses it. He never yells aside from, during the attack when he goes, "We are leaving." The rest of the time,
Yeah,
he's very reserved. Where I think Remar would have just always been up here because if you look at his performances in the Warriors, things like that, he's always up here. He's not
right,
very, kind of reserved at all. So I don't think he would have done a bad job, but I think it would have definitely. I just don't know how the chemistry would have worked because I
right,
think he and Weaver work off each other so well. Um, I just can't see Remar and her working like that.
right,
With that quiet, I'm attracted to you in the middle of this insane thing going on
right.
situation. I'm wondering if Remar's performance would have been more I have no interest in you, you know, as a female or anything else. I'm doing my job. That's all I'm doing right now. And somehow Bean was able to balance that. And I'm going to do my job. I'm going to protect these people. We're going to try to get out of here. But you know, you're kind of attractive. I kind of like you. You're on my level. I like this.
Right. And I think quiet is more powerful anyway. It may not look more powerful, but in real life it is, because the guy that you're going up against, if he's quiet, that's scarier than, you know, that's scary as hell.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what they're thinking. They're not, you know, screaming at you or anything. I think that shows a lot of confidence. So I don't know. I'm a huge fan of Beans to begin with. So I'm kind of glad the way it worked out.
I agree.
And Dexter got it daddy out of it.
Yeah, exactly. So. Except now Christian Slater is going to be playing his daddy in the Dexter prequel, which I still don't know how to feel about right now.
I don't either. I don't either.
So what's next on your list, boss?
Okay, so I have to actually check my notes. Okay. Exorcist 3.
Oh, nice. That's on my list too. So that's great.
Oh, yeah?
Thank you.
Okay. Just there's so much obvious here, and it has little to do with the fact that number 2 was such a disappointment. But that does play into it, because I think anything would have looked good next to 2. Or at least, you know, almost anything. I'm not going to make a general statement, but almost anything would have been an improvement. So there were times after I saw Exorcist 3 in the theater that I kind of analyzed, or maybe overanalyzed. Did I like that just because it wasn't number 2, or do I really like it? And the truth of the matter is, the performances are sensational. That is an actor's movie. And I know that the one jump scare in it, well, there's not only one, but the jump scare in it has nothing to do with performance. I get that. But when that has happened, you're left with the acting. And I mean, to have those actors in that movie, it was just so great. You don't always get a lot of A-list actors or performances in a horror movie. It's unfortunate, but it's true. You know, you get them in dramas, and, you know, again, I mentioned 12 Angry Men, but, you know, that's a performance, or The Thing. But in a out and out horror movie like The Exorcist, or in this case, The Exorcist 3, I wasn't sure that they were going to get the kind of performances that stood out like they did in the first movie. And in my opinion, that paid off in spades. Everybody was great in Exorcist 3. And that's what you're left with after the jump scares, after the spooky stuff. Man, if you don't have that, you're sunk.
See, and what's interesting in this day and age of younger horror fans talking about slow burn movies, A24 type stuff, what they're missing is you don't have the true horror or really strong performances in those movies. I don't believe.
Right.
Really
no, I agree.
So. George C. Scott. Okay, I saw Exorcist 3 when I was 17 years old. So this should have been my anti-horror film. This shouldn't be. No, what I saw was, this is an amazing movie with dialogue that was so thought out. And so, I mean, just monologues that were brilliant. Him talking about the fish in the bathtub at home.
Yep.
I just remember watching it and going, where is this going? Why is he talking about this? And then when you get to the punchline, oh, you know, if I go home and I see it swimming.
Right.
You know, and it just made you love his version of Kinderman even more. Where I wasn't terribly attached to Kinderman in the original one. I thought it was a good performance, but just Scott, you know, just the way he played that character, it was just wonderful. How he went from, you know, quiet moments to losing it I love when he's like, it's not in the file. Just those moments. You're just like, oh
Right.
my guy is a monster. And for a guy who apparently did not want to make that movie, you would never know.
No, but
You-
that's a true artist. You give 100% no matter what the assignment, and
right.
you give 100%. It's what you and I talked about in the very beginning of the website is, your name's on it, and when your name is on it, you do the best you can, or you suffer the consequences because your name's on it. So
Because I
yeah,
can't think of any movie with him where he did a poor job.
no, I can't either.
Even smaller parts like Taps, movies like that,
Yep.
Hardcore. He's tremendous in it. I just never saw a bad performance out of him. The Changeling
Yep.
is another great horror film.
And a
And
tough one to do. I mean, that
oh,
the Changeling was emotionally had to have been a bitch to do because
right,
you're in a bad place the entire, first 3/4 of the movie. You're in a, horrible place. And I just respect the hell out of him. This guy was Patton. This guy, was an award winner, and you would think a lesser actor, one who didn't take his craft so seriously, you would think he'd come on and kind of just phone it in.
hmm.
And it's so opposite that. But everybody in that movie shines.
Oh, Ned Flanders. No, Ed Flanders, not Ned
Ed
Flanders.
Flanders.
Ed Flanders from Saint Elsewhere. He does such a great job
Yeah.
as Father Claire. And when he dies, you're gutted. You're just like, oh no. And he dies so badly with the canisters of his blood
Yeah.
at the table near him. It's just, Blatty had such command of not only the actors and their performances, but of the camera. Just the composition he does in certain sequences. I mean, literally as good as other horror filmmakers at the time who had been doing 10, 12 features by that
Right.
time. This
Right.
was
Who've
only
been at
his
it
second
forever.
film.
I know.
Exactly. Second film, and not only does it outdo his previous movie, but it stands on the shoulders of the original movie he's making a sequel to. And
Absolutely.
I was never able to find out if William Friedkin. I know he hated part two, obviously, but I never was able to find anything on his opinion of the third movie.
Yeah, and I would have liked to have known, but
Yeah.
it wouldn't have mattered. Meaning,
Right.
I think the movie is fantastic. I think the movie is a legitimate, no kidding around sequel to something as powerful as The Exorcist, and and stands proudly on the side, on the side of The Exorcist as a partner, as a true partner. Um, so if Friedkin had come out and said, it's a piece of crap, I would have thought, yeah, okay, he's nuts.
Exactly. He's just being cranky this week.
Exactly. Because it's just out and out, beginning to end. It's a damn good movie.
And what's really interesting, it's one of the few times, and it has happened over the years, where a studio's interference, I feel, made the movie better. Because in the original cut, because it was closer to Blatty's novel, there was no exorcism. There was none of that.
Right.
It was a very straightforward tale of possession, if you will.
Right.
And it was the studio like, look, we're not calling it Legion. It's The Exorcist. We need an exorcism. And he fought them and fought them. And he went and, he didn't want to do it, but he reshot new sequences and everything to add to the film. But I think it works because I've seen the other cut because it's on the Blu-ray. And there's just something about it. It just doesn't ring like an Exorcist film without an exorcism of some kind.
Right.
And I really feel that it works better with the studio version.
Yeah, and thank God they got involved this time, because all we would be talking about is the fact that there is no exorcism in The Exorcist 3.
Right.
I mean, it's I won't go too much in the other direction, but it's like the middle of the last Halloween trilogy, where Michael and Laurie aren't in the same scene at any point, yet that's supposed to be the main thrust of this entire series. You know, she
Right.
came back for 3 movies, and they just it's just not there. And in the middle one, and the middle one's always the one that makes you decide, okay, I'll see the last one. And it just wasn't there. So yeah, we would have been going ape shit over the fact that there's no Exorcist in the Exorcist 3. So I'm actually glad they got involved. You're absolutely right.
And of course, one of the biggest parts of Exorcist 3 that just works like gangbusters is Brad Dourif as the
Yes.
Gemini Killer.
I,
I would have argued he could have deserved at least a nomination for that movie because he's that good in it. I truly believe that.
again, what Blatty did was take a second sequel and turn it into an actor's movie that you could put in any film festival, even if there's no other horror entries. But if you're sitting there, you want to highlight acting, this is the movie.
And I think that's why it's having more appreciation now than when it came out back in 1990.
Yeah.
I think 1990 was just a summer of too many movies anyways. You're talking about the same summer of Die Hard 2, Predator 2. It was like a huge sequel summer.
Right.
And I think this little horror film, and it was a little horror film, it just couldn't find an audience. I don't think people were ready for it. And I think that's why people look at it now and appreciate it. The people who do like slow burn, things of that nature, they're like, oh wow, this is that type of movie. But the acting is phenomenal.
Well, yeah, and after number 2, which literally was number 2, what after that, why bother going to the theater to see a third one?
Yeah.
You know?
I
I
gotta
mean,
say, with part 2 though, I don't like it. Don't get me wrong; it's not a good film at all. But I guess you have to admire a director's, I don't know, audacity to say, I'm going to do everything in the opposite direction of that first film, and just this is what I'm doing, like it or not. And you're just like, okay. And the studio paid for it. That's the funny part.
well,
You
yeah,
know,
that's true.
they were just like, yeah, do what you need to. And I'm just like, wow, no studio interference on that one.
Yeah, I know. They decided to interfere with better pictures, but not with this one.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe that was the beginning of studios just being like, it's horror. It doesn't matter. Just get it made and put it out.
That's a possibility, or just, you know, name recognition. We're so sure that this is going to make a gazillion dollars because
Right.
everybody's going to go see it. It doesn't even matter if it's a good movie; they're going to see it anyway.
And what's wild is Blatty almost wasn't able to make that movie. The studio and Morgan Creek, they were not convinced they should put him on a film of this scale because it was meant to be a big summer picture.
Yep.
Do you know who was offered the movie and turned it down?
No.
John Carpenter.
Really?
And that is fascinating to me. I'm like, what does a John Carpenter Exorcist 3 look like? But in a weird way, I think it would have been the same because you had very much Carpenter-like shots. The wide shots, the angles that he would do is very similar to his work.
Yeah. Well, that's again, it's a tough call, but I am perfectly happy with the what came out um, for The Exorcist 3, and that's why it made my list. I mean, I think it absolutely deserves to be on my list because it just shocked the hell out of me.
I know in the theater when that scene came up, and you know the scene
Oh,
I'm talking about,
oh yeah,
that was amazing to have you saw an entire audience. It was like a concert when people do the wave, except everyone was terrified. Everyone was like, the moment that happened, and
yeah.
it's just such a great feeling afterwards. You hear people laughing after, going, "Oh, I can't believe you got me that bad. Oh my goodness!" And then you couldn't hear the dialogue for at least a
Right.
minute and a half, 2 minutes afterwards, because people had to compose themselves. So that was
it's the equivalent of the head in the bottom of the boat in Jaws.
exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
or chum some of this shit. You know, come down here and chum some of this shit. It's just one of those iconic scenes where just everybody lost their shit.
And what's interesting is I'm waiting for someone to rip it off, or pay homage to it rather. I'm waiting for another, director to go, you know what? That worked. You fooled the audience, just
Yep.
when they're getting irritated, then you scare them.
Yep.
And you see other filmmakers attempt to do that, but they never do it on that level. They always give up. They're like, no, I can't leave it going this long. I'll scare them now.
Right.
Instead of giving that other minute and a half, and then pulling it out. And just work of brilliance by Blatty, man.
Which is
now you got me curious. Sorry.
Oh, you have to see it. If you haven't, you have to see it.
Yeah.
And it's funny that it's on both of your guys' list. So
Yeah, that's neat. Yeah.
I
was going to mention that one next, actually, so it's cool that he went ahead and pulled it out.
Yeah, it's that kind of performance movie. Honestly, you will appreciate the hell out of that.
Okay.
So that's your assignment. You have to watch it.
Well, Nye hasn't seen it yet. I showed her the original, but we haven't shown her part 3 yet. So
perfect. There you go.
We'll put
Family movie night.
Family night at the movies. Absolutely. Okay.
All right.
Your turn.
My turn, right?
Yep.
A little movie that we joked about earlier in the show, Evil Dead Dose is my next pick. It's I had to examine all 3 movies, or at least the 2 sequels, and I'm like, which one is supreme? Definitely Evil Dead 2, because it was able to do what Army of Darkness couldn't, because it was a universal picture, which is you had horror, you had the gore, and then the comedy. And what was a trip was showing it to our daughter, who had seen the original and knew it was scary.
Right.
And she was watching part 2, and she would laugh, and then she would look over at me. Dada, am I supposed to be laughing? Are they trying to be scary? And I'm like, not at this moment. At this moment, Ash is just an idiot. So you can let him be. You can laugh at his faces and everything that he's doing. I remember seeing the movie when I was a teenager for the first time, having the same emotions. Like, how am I supposed to feel about this right now? Is Raimi purposely doing this? I don't get it. But then the more I watched it, the more I loved it. And then by the time you get to the ending, it's such a roller coaster of a movie, literally, that before you know it, he's getting dropped out of the sky in medieval times. And you just want to see what happens next. You're like, oh my God, that was wonderful. And it was one of those movies we rented all the time. If there was nothing else in, until my mom bought me a copy of it, we always rented Evil Dead 2.
Yep.
Every time. Never got old.
No, that's the thing about it. That's the magical thing about it. It doesn't get old. It's one of those movies you can just have on a loop. And and I this. I told you this many times. I did not like the direction of it when I first saw it. Because I thought, geez, you took this incredibly scary, serious movie and you're almost doing Abbott and Costello meets. And then I started appreciating it on its own. And when it wasn't linked to the first one, that's when I fully appreciated it the most. And I thought, my God, this is kind of brilliant. Now, good people had tried that in the past, and it hadn't redeemed the movie for me. In fact, we'll be talking about one of them a little bit later, but it really, they were able to do this, and I think a lot of it, as much as I want to credit Raimi and the entire staff, I think that a lot of it had to do with Bruce Campbell.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think he makes it work. I think a lesser actor could have either made it scary or made it funny, but couldn't do both.
That is his brilliance as an actor.
Yeah.
There's somehow he was able to decipher how that character needed to be played, especially in the second and third movie, and then the TV show.
Yeah,
And
because I'm
he's
sorry, go ahead.
charming, he's stupid, he's all these things, and it's just so great to watch him work.
I agree. He always, no matter what he's playing, he always has just a hint of that used car salesman in him, where
Yeah,
where even when he's in a dire situation, it's always like, yeah, but there's that he's capable of that wink,
yeah, yeah.
and it's like, holy shit, he's again doesn't get enough credit. He really doesn't. He's a sensational actor.
So I have a question.
Sure.
Now, again, I have this really, really scary memory from when I was younger. I was watching this movie and there was a trap door that had white eyes. It looked like a lady with white hair, and she was just going nuts and scaring the shit out of whoever was in that cabin. But as a child, I was watching this and it scared me so bad that I would close my eyes, but I could still see her, with my eyes shut. So I don't know what movie that was, but then Ricky told me that was it Evil Dead 2 or Evil Dead?
No, it's the first one. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the one you're thinking of. It's the original. Yeah.
Yeah. And it did the same thing to me, except I was older than you were, so I wasn't hiding my eyes. But that it's terrifying. It really is. It's crazy good.
I don't know why anybody would leave a child in the room by themselves to watch this movie. Just putting that out there.
Well,
Just
you're gonna
saying.
have to bring that
I
up
got
with a therapist, because I can't answer that, because it's everything my parents did leaving me alone, I thought was absolutely amazing. But I think if Michael did that to my grandkids, I'd be like, wait a minute there, boss. You know? So
You can't leave them with this one. Yeah, you
yeah,
might.
exactly. So I don't know. When my parents did it, it was right. If he does it, it's wrong.
Going back, going back to the Bruceisms. One of my favorite bits in Evil Dead 2. It's when her father's spirit appears, and they're all kind of hunkered behind him for protection. And he does this great thing where he kind of looks to see that they see it as well. So it's almost like, okay, this is real. This is really
Yeah.
happening. They see it too. I think it's great because he has these almost Polanski repulsion moments before
Right.
they arrive. He's in this cabin by himself. There's the great moment in the chair. He can't scream, you can't get it out, and then it finally comes out, and it's just those are just again another actor I don't think would have been able to nail that convincingly,
I
and
would
it
put
goes
my
back
life
to
on
the
it.
way he plays them. Yeah, I don't think he would have been able to do that, and it's so great to see the older he became, the character of Ash changes.
Right.
So, it's very interesting because in part two, he talked about on the commentary that how he worked out for it and everything. And you can see the muscle definition. And then by the time he gets to three, he's at that point where he's done a few soap operas and everything, everything else, Knots Landing, things like that. And he's like, I'm a stud. And that's how he plays it. Ash thinks he is the shit in Army of Darkness. And
Yeah.
then when you get to the TV show, he still thinks he's the shit, but he's obviously, he's got
But
the
yeah,
belly now and everything
yeah,
else.
exactly.
But he doesn't care. He's still, I'm the man. And
Right.
it's just wonderful. That's why I was so upset when that show got canceled. And
Again, we've talked about this quite a bit, but that and Stand Against Evil, uh,
Stand Against Evil.
were
she loves that one.
two shows that existed at the same time and made me happy. I mean, just made me happy, the fact that
Yep.
they were both on. And as far as I'm concerned, if they wanted to still be on, so this would have been like, I don't know, the sixth season or something, I would be
Yeah.
there every single time, because I think both of them are just gold.
Yeah. See, now Stand Against Evil, to a point, I can understand why it was canceled. It being on a regular cable network, I
Oh
can see
no.
why they didn't double down on it. But Ash versus Evil Dead, we should have had 3 or 4 more seasons because it was our community that didn't come out for it. Because Bruce said, look, all you have to do is download the app, just click on it, and watch the show for a few minutes. That's all we need. We just need eyes on it, and they'll give us another season.
Yeah.
And people they weren't there. And then after it's over, they're like, oh, I really love that show. It's like, well, where were you?
Yeah.
Talking like Palmer, where were you?
No, you mentioned you could understand with Stand Against Evil, but the thing is, I don't understand why, when it could have gone longer, some streaming service didn't pick it up. Because
it was really, really good.
Oh, it really was. And I mean, and he's freaking brilliant anyway.
I
love John C. McGinley. Yeah.
I watched Scrubs religiously because he had some of the greatest lines ever written for TV, but it was all in the delivery. On the page, it was like, but
it had to be him.
But give it to him. Holy crap, are they great? And that's what he brought over to Stan, which is those wonderful lines that only he can recite. So you've got him and you've got Ash running 2 shows and brilliantly. And again, if they were both on now, no matter what the season was, I would be glued to the television set every single time. I love them both. So
the Stand Against Evil line that my wife and I laugh at every time is when he talks about his wife boycotting breakfast for dinner
after,
and that if you crack an egg after 12. Because we love breakfast for dinner, so it's funny, to hear that dialogue, and it's just so wonderful.
Yeah, both shows, and maybe we'll do a show about this, but both shows had wonderful casts, and just we're top to bottom, we're terrific, a lot of fun. So
many quotable lines of dialogue too, even on the TV show. I love the bit when he tells Pablo, it's like, we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna take this demon out, and then we're gonna go get some churros. He goes, and that's not racist, that's just a good Mexican dessert. I was in tears. I could not stop laughing.
Yeah,
so ridiculous, man.
But you're right. Ash progressed the way it should have, the way he should have, and so I love that. I love when the first shot of Ash versus Evil Dead, he's kind of back to the camera and turns around, and as he turns around, you realize, this guy isn't quite. He kind of let himself go a little bit.
Yeah.
Yet it's still him. So you're right. Yeah. You're right. It was brilliant from beginning to end, that character.
Yeah.
So
I haven't watched this show. So.
Oh, you have.
You still haven't been able to see it. Yeah.
Only Stan.
From a great movie comes a good sequel, Halloween 2.
Okay, that's a good choice.
Now,
I enjoyed that one a lot.
It does not have the bells and whistles of the first one. It is more of a standard horror movie. But as far as standard horror movies go, it kind of kicks a little ass. And it's got a dynamite ending. It's got good performances by everybody, although, what's the wise guy? The one who does the Amazing Grace song.
Dietz from Relentless.
Right, yeah. So
I know who you're talking about them.
When I met him, Leo Rossi.
Leo Rossi.
Okay.
Leo Rossi.
So when I met him, I said, I got to tell you something. You must be a sensational actor, because everybody I've talked to from the show said that you're one of the nicest people that they've ever worked with. But my God, are you an asshole in that movie? And he said, thanks. And I said, no, seriously. I mean, I would have punched you out. And he said, that's all right. I would have punched me out too. So But yeah, I mean, you look at him and you just hate his freaking guts. And but anyway,
where you going, college boy? What did I tell
yeah,
you?
exactly.
Never,
But
never date nurses. Patience, that's another story.
yeah, but that's, I mean, the good performances and Pleasance is, Pleasance chews up the scenery and
That's his movie, man. It's
oh, absolutely.
that part two made me love that dude so much. I was the
Yep,
only 8-year-old running around with trying to be Dr. Loomis with my little brother as Michael Myers.
yep.
We would reenact coming through doors and everything. But that open, man, right, where he's,
Oh,
tell him he's still on the loose. It's like, I've been trick or treated to death tonight, and then perfect. You don't know what death is, and needle
yeah,
drop.
that was great.
Great.
Yeah,
I
that
love
there's
the fact that Alan Howarth redid the score into the
yep,
new tech with the new synthesizers because
yep.
Carpenter was busy on the thing. So it was Alan Howarth's deal, and I think it's one of the strongest scores of the entire series. I think.
Oh, absolutely. And I play it more than the original.
Yes, yes.
I mean, I have the CDs to both of them. Uh, to you people in the audience, CDs are a small disc that looks like a Blu-ray, but it's just music. So, and to people like me, it's the latest technology, which is really sad. But anyway, um, it's
MP3
just
players, Rich. MP3
yeah,
players.
I know. But and the funny thing is, I've had an MP3 player for about 12, 15 years, and yeah, I don't think I ever opened it. But yeah, but anyway, but I do have a portable CD player, which,
Uh,
used to be the newest thing, but
yeah.
actuality it looks like it's this big now when it's actually only this big. Um
That's
but
that's why Rich is the man at barbecues. They're like, oh, he brought the music.
yeah, absolutely. So, but I do play that I play that soundtrack all the time. I mean, I
Yeah,
really do. It's a solid sequel to a movie that could have gone so far in the other direction.
yeah.
And and part two could have gone so far in the opposite direction that I'm just thankful that they were both made and they were both good.
I love Dick Warlock's performance
Yes.
as Michael Myers, as opposed to, not that I dislike Nick Castle, uh, but I love this robotic, even more or less than human mannerism that he walks in.
Yep.
And really, the other films picked up on that. The other sequels went ahead and usually had their Myers more akin to his character, his performance, as opposed to Castle.
Right.
And I think that works. And what's incredible about Halloween 2, because last week when we were talking about remakes, bad remakes, you brought up the Halloween David Gordon Green trilogy. What's amazing is, what do they do in Halloween Kills, the second movie? They literally take you back to 1982 of that version of the movie,
Right.
which is so bizarre to me because I'm like, well, you just separated yourself from the series, but you're going to literally pull imagery from that series. And I'm just
Exactly.
like,
Yeah. You can
and
only
then
have it one way.
exactly. And then when they flash back to his daughter dying, to the death of Annie, what do they use but a scene from Halloween 2 when they bring her body out on the gurney?
Yep.
So it's like you're just pulling from the movie twice,
Right.
which is laughable because you were like, it's not canon. It's not part of our world. Part one was the only movie that we're going to acknowledge.
Exactly. But
So,
everything, so many decisions in that trilogy is just downright stupidity that
absolutely.
I don't even bother. I don't bother trying to find a narrative in that whole series. But if you remember correctly, when I said a remake that I didn't like, I pulled up all three boxes because they're
Yeah.
inseparable. They're one, they're one piece to me. And I won't tell you what that piece is.
Uh, Well,
Okay.
I like that choice quite a bit. I think that's amazing. Oh,
Hold
go ahead.
on.
Sorry, boss. Oh, did he freeze? Or is he there?
No, he's
Oh,
there.
he froze. Oh,
Oh,
no, he's moving. Okay. I was like, wow, it froze.
Do you want me to get the mirror for under my nose?
I was just about to make that joke. I'm like, oh, let's take out the mirror. I love that.
All right.
That trope is like my favorite.
Yeah.
All right.
Alrighty, I'm up to plate next. We've got Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which to me is such an underrated sequel, and there's so
Yep.
many people who are supposedly fans of the Nightmare on Elm Street series who talk badly about it,
Yep.
and I don't get it.
I don't either.
The first time I saw this movie, it was amazing because I was living in California at the time, and we won tickets on a radio show, actually. So my friends and I journeyed out from Alameda, California into San Francisco, which is the equivalent of like going to Manhattan for some New Yorkers.
Right.
And we got lost. We just made it in time, but it was just a great experience. Like everyone in that theater was there for Freddy Krueger. And it was just great to see their reactions to this very meta film. You heard hooting and hollering when Heather Langenkamp came on screen. But one of my best memories is when they cut to Wes Craven's house, which we know wasn't Wes's house.
Right.
But you see that crazy swimming pool with the water going over the side. There was a guy behind me. He was like, fuck, Wes. Like, that's a nice house. I just thought that was great. But
That is.
Once again, proving Craven's just amazing talent as a filmmaker. To come up with that idea, like, what would I do with this character? How do I take it to another level? And to put it in our world and then kind of blend real life experiences like in Camp had with a Stalker. It just worked. It worked so well. And I've read reviews where they're like, everyone's bland. And I'm like, I just don't see it. I think Heather's great. I think Roberts really he comes off as constantly on edge because you learn that he's been experiencing these images and everything. And I just love every bit of it. I love when she visits Wes and his dialogue, he goes through his dialogue and then she looks at the computer and you see that everything that's been said, he has already written.
Right.
And it just, I love his vision of Freddy, Super Freddy, if you will.
Yeah.
I love the concept with the trench coat and I just love all that. There's just so many wonderful moments in that movie. The score, by J. Peter Robinson is it's very respectful towards the original Bernstein score, but it takes it in a much larger, almost epic sort of level, which I think is great. There's just so much in that film I love.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I think the only thing it suffers from is wait a minute, I can't see anybody moving. We actually did freeze.
Oh wow, you froze for a moment.
Wow. Okay, so the only thing that about New Nightmare that I can figure is these are people who want it to suffer from the Halloween 3 syndrome. They don't like what's in it, and what they would much rather New Nightmare do is do the same exact frickin' formula again and again and again. So, when people started complaining about Halloween, it's like, well, what new do you want? Well, we want Michael back. Well, okay, but is that what you're going to have for the rest of your life? And unfortunately, that's what they decided.
Yeah.
So, New Nightmare took the chances, and I think it's dynamite. I really do. I mean, I think people who don't get it maybe don't deserve to get it. I hate to be that way, but I that's what I
Like,
think
not trying to gatekeep, but if you don't get it, you don't get it.
Yeah, tough shit, I mean, I thought it was a great direction to put it into, and I think they did it perfectly.
Oh yeah. One of the scenes, the audience, when I saw it at that premiere event, that people just went insane for was the park when Dylan's on top of the ride, the jungle gym. just everyone was like, "Oh my god, they just all freaked out, and they literally clapped and cheered when they caught Dylan, which I thought was great. It showed how vested they were in these characters.
Right. I agree. And thank goodness they decided to go in this direction. And thank goodness they were willing to take the heat for it, because what you end up with is a damn good movie.
Yeah, it surprises me that it grossed the least out of the entire series, which is just shocking to me, because if you're a fan of the films, you think, well, Wes is back. I'm gonna come for Wes, if nothing else. Or maybe it was just that period of time where certain horror films just weren't clicking with people. Maybe, I don't know.
I don't know. I wish I could be surprised that it didn't do well, but I think, although I never checked it out, I bet you if you went back to Friday the 13th, the series, I don't mean the TV series, I mean the movie series, you'll find out that maybe Jason Takes Manhattan probably grossed the most. And it's like,
but it's the worst of the movies.
like, right, exactly. But by that time, everybody knew, that they should go and have a fun time with Jason, and maybe it was the same thing. I don't know. I don't know. All I know is that I'm almost guaranteeing New Nightmare did lousy business.
Yeah, I think hopefully at some point Freddy's going to make a return to the horror consciousness in some type of reboot. Something's going to happen.
Right.
And maybe fans of the new Nightmare on Elm Street that gets created will go back and say, hey, that new Nightmare was pretty damn good, actually, compared to the other sequels.
Right.
It'd be a nice little bit of justice for that movie, I think.
I hope so. I don't like to see good movies get punished. I like to see good movies get rewarded. And they took a hell of a chance with this one. And I think it paid off. If the payoff is you end up with a good piece of art, that works for me. New Nightmare is perfect choice. It didn't make my list, but it's one of those ones where I'm like, crap, yeah, that's a good one. So
yeah, that's why I was saying earlier, remakes was a much easier list for me. This one I kept having to shift them around, and because I kept trying to say, okay, well, this one doesn't get a lot of love, so I'm going to mention this one over this one. And it was so hard because there's actually quite a few good sequels out there.
Yep. Mine is, although I don't have the box here because it's a complete legacy collection, but mine is Son of Frankenstein, 1939. Nice. And again, Bride gets all of the press. Everybody wants to talk about what an incredible movie Bride is, and they're right. But Son of Frankenstein has such a completely different look, has that German expressionist Caligari kind of look to it. And I still say that and the 1932 Black Cat are the best movies to look at visually. Just they're both amazing. Son of Frankenstein and the Black Cat. I watch them more often than I can say. And Bella is Bela or is in Son of Frankenstein, and makes the part so much his that I happen to think, with the exception of the 31 Dracula, that he should have been so proud of Son of Frankenstein, and then he redoes the character in Ghost of Frankenstein, and because they had a different monster, it went from Karloff to Chaney. He's the glue that holds those two movies together, Son and Ghost. Without him, it's just more disjointed, craziness. And so I watch Son of Frankenstein about as much as I watch Bride, but it gets no mentioning. You know, nobody does it. So
why? Why do you think that is?
Well, because James Whale wasn't attached to it anymore. Because Frankenstein and Bride have pretty much the same cast. Um, and it's a true continuation. Years have passed in Son of Frankenstein, um, and they couldn't get anybody except for Karloff. They couldn't get anybody for the role because either the characters were dead or had been run out of town on a rail kind of thing. The reputation smashed to bits. And so they had to come up with something brand new. New director, new cinematographer, new, the whole thing was different. And in this case, I thought it worked just fine.
Now, Roland Lee, who directed Son, was he primarily just like a universal kind of stock director? Was he just kind of bounced from project to project?
Yes.
Interesting. Because I think the only other horror film I saw on his filmography was Tower of London. Everything else seemed to be, he went from multi-genre kind of pictures.
Right. Another interesting thing that happened during Son was Karloff celebrated his 51st birthday on the set. In fact, there's probably 30 or 40 photos of them, Basil Rathbone and Bela and Boris, sitting around eating cake and stuff like that. But that day of his 51st birthday, his only child was born.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. His daughter, Sarah, was born on Boris's 51st birthday. So what you're seeing a guy celebrating not only his birthday with the people on the set, but also that he's a daddy now.
They share a birthday. Awesome. That's lovely.
Yep. Yep. So anyway, that's in a nutshell, you're not going to get a cooler looking Frankenstein movie because again, that German kind of expressionist vibe to it. And I can't imagine a cooler one. They great angles on everything, including doorways. I mean, just everything looks a bit askew in different direction. I love it. So it's just such a different film, but it distinguishes itself as part of the legacy and a deserving part of the legacy. So that was my reason.
I got you. All right. Well, my final one, I'm cheating, kind of like you did with your David Gordon Green stuff. So I couldn't pick between them. It's the one moment I can't do Sophie's Choice. So my final choice is going to be Day of the Dead along with Dawn of the Dead.
We will allow it.
I concur. Easily two of the best sequels of all time. Truly sequels in terms of an actual creator taking his image or his idea further and further along. Really, it's the only true Dead trilogy in my opinion. Even to know he made other Living Dead films after it, nothing touches upon what he was able to do in Dawn and Day. And very much like the difference between say Aliens and Alien 3, you kind of have the same thing here. They exist in their own wonderful micro world.
Yes.
And they all have their own themes, and the separation of the years in between them benefit those movies so much.
Oh, absolutely.
And I just have a hard time picking one over the other because I just love the characters so much. It goes back to the writing. It goes back to the acting. You just love these people. And it's just, every time I watch it, I never get bored with it. I've seen Dawn of the Dead. If I were to go through all the movies I've seen so many times that I've lost count, I would go, oh, well, Jaws, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead. It's just, it just became a movie that if we rented it, I'd watch it as many times as possible. And then once I owned a copy, it was the movie to put on while I was doing something else.
Right.
And I just love revisiting it. And every time I get something new out of both of them. And I think that you would be hard pressed to find any other trilogy by a director to where you can say every single film is as good as the other. Very rarely does that happen. You're always going to have one of a trilogy that's it could have been better, but every single one of these knocked out of the park.
Yeah. Well, I can decide between the two. I do like Day more than Dawn. I know. And you know,
Right now, there's a whole bunch of people like, oh.
Yeah, right. We have a bunch
Boo
of
hiss.
we have a bunch of panties in a bunch, but the bottom line is this.
Uh-huh.
Day of the Dead has no pie fight moment. And that and the blood pressure machine and basically the stuff by the biker gang
The shenanigans
helped to take me out of it. I didn't see a place for it. I know a lot of people say you've got to have a little levity in a movie to alleviate, you know, because you have all this horror going on. You have to make them be able to come back up to a level where you can scare them again. Okay, and I understand that, but I don't necessarily agree with it. So the only reason I like Day better is because there is none of those moments, and
Right.
and I like mine. You know, I'm a guy who likes savory and a guy who likes sweet. I just don't like them together. I never got the idea of, you know, chili with chocolate ice cream kind of thing. It's like, yeah, not for me. So, and I'm very much the same with my horror movies. Uh, Going back to a pie fight seemed like a Sam Raimi thing to do, because he, you know, so likes the Three Stooges that the Three Stooges make it into damn near everything that he does, and I'm completely fine with that. George, on the other hand, this was the first time he injected comedy. You know, Night of the Living Dead, deadly serious. Um, and Dawn of the Dead, up to that point, which was what, like an hour and 45 minutes in or something along those lines,
Yeah.
was deadly serious. I mean, that tenement scene in Dawn is about as fucked up as it gets. And that's why when the pie fight came in, and again, this isn't to cut on Dawn of the Dead. It's just to say that my choice was easier because of the pie fight and the blood pressure cuff and all that other stuff. So Day of the Dead is it for me. And you probably will or will not be surprised to learn that that's my next one.
That's cool. Yeah.
So
What I will say about Day of the Dead, and I see why you chose that one over Dawn, is that if you were to take the lines of dialogue, like the most quotable lines, the lines that you remember, Dawn has some great stuff, but
yep,
Day has so many amazing lines of dialogue.
yep.
I, Terry Alexander's monologue
Oh,
while they're drinking, that is Shakespeare to me. That is just beautiful dialogue that every time I hear it, you know, tears well up because I'm like, you don't hear dialogue like that anymore.
exactly.
And this was in a
Exactly.
zombie movie, and it's just so great. He is so wonderful in that sequence.
I
Everyone has a moment in that movie.
Yeah, and I cannot. It's another one of those you stop and watch the screen while it's on. Um, I cannot watch Day without that being the highlight of it. If I were to come in after that scene, I would probably just watch the movie, in its entirety. I'd probably pop the disc in,
Okay.
because that scene is just it's amazing. There are hardly words. Like you said, it's Shakespeare. It is that level, and it's delivered um, on a Laurence Olivier level. I mean, he's just brilliant when he says it. And again, I know that there's no zombie hijinks during this scene, but to me, it's everything.
The seriousness of the movie is what ultimately draws me to it. And although I like the shenanigans in Dawn, the more I thought about it, yeah, Day probably does stand out more to me simply because it's more grown. Once you're over all of the silliness that Dawn of the Dead had to offer towards the very latter half of that movie, because you're right, Rich, the first part of it is really, really hardcore. The tenement building and all of it, including how they introduce you to characters that you're going to stay with. You're like, oh, that's serious. These people, they're not playing around.
Yep.
And in Day, you immediately get that and you stay with it. It doesn't pump the brakes at all. It just
Yeah.
gets worse and worse and worse and more serious. And then the stakes are even higher. And then before you know it, it's the end, but there is such a huge relief at that end. So you're not let down at all through
Right.
the entirety of this movie, where yes, in Dawn, you have that really weird quirkiness, which at the time, since I don't know, Ricky might have this correct. He might have showed me Day after we saw Shaun of the Dead,
Okay.
and then shown me Dawn of the Dead. And I was like, oh, okay. So I think I might have watched them flipped, but still felt like um, I had more of a connection with Dawn because of Shaun of the Dead. So
Right.
the more I get time to think about it, I really do like the seriousness of Day of the Dead, because you're right. There's so much memorable stuff in there, and the performances. That really is what keeps you engaged in that movie and talking about it long after you're done watching.
Yes. And I think Day suffers because it's not as boisterous as Dawn, and because who the hell saw it in the theater? I did, but
I
I
didn't
don't
get to.
I don't know anybody, I mean, good friends of mine, I don't know anybody else who saw it in the theater, but I was willing to go. God, it was like North Buckham. I have no idea where I saw it, but it wasn't in Hamden, Connecticut. It was just, I think it was on the New York border, but
Had to
that's what I
travel.
that's what I did. And it was well worth it to see it on the big screen. But no, it does not get a lot of love. And I don't know what the problem is, but um the other thing is, we talked about the tenement building at the beginning of Dawn. And what about when the one-legged priest comes in? I mean,
Mm.
holy shit. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah. That
that
was real. That's
yeah,
not, they didn't CGI that. Nah, this is a
and
real person.
and he says, we're stronger than them, but pretty soon I think they'll be stronger than us. And it's like, oh holy crap. And this is a guy who has God on his side, and he's that bleak about it. And you're basically saying, yeah, we're in for a tough ride. So Dawn had that brilliant scene, and then a half hour later was having a pie fight. And again, I understand it's the bikers, but I've known bikers. They're not the pie fight kind of guys. They're not, that's not them. but again, it was a creative choice that he made. I just wouldn't have made that choice. Then again, I didn't get to direct a whole bunch of great movies and, be kind of brilliant. The only thing I will argue with Rick about is I happen to see it as a quadrilogy. I think, and I wrote about it. I think Land of the Dead has cemented its place in that storyline. I think it went exactly where Day of the Dead brought us. I think it went exactly past that. Um, so I do think of it as a quadrilogy, um, and I see Night of the Living Dead through Land of the Dead as that single narrative. So, but that's the only thing I'll argue about.
I enjoy Land of the Dead quite a bit, but I think that there's just something about it that still feels like a studio movie in a weird kind of way to me.
Okay.
And I wasn't a huge fan of was it Simon Baker, I believe the actor's name is. He was on a CBS show for a long time.
Yeah.
He didn't have that same kind of leading man quality of the other actors Romero had picked before. Like I would have almost enjoyed John Leguizamo playing that character maybe.
Right.
Instead of the actor they chose and have someone else for his character. I think would have been an interesting way to take it. But,
okay, I see your point with that, but I think it was more deliberate. I think it is a slightly more polished community because, and this of course cracks me up every time, is the fact that the humans actually think they're in control in this movie. I mean, it's pretty damn funny to me that they have that, kind of bizarre on the ground, um where you're posing with zombies, that are chained up. You have that kind of Ren fest going on, and then the high tower with the people who really have the money, and you have people aspire to get into that tower. Simon Baker isn't. He's not the guy who's trying to get in there. He's just be happy if he can just kind of pack it up after at one point and get away. And I thought it was a clever choice after you've had a movie that has the kind of Ken Foray kind of, heroes. I thought it was an interesting choice, but I happen to like it. In Land of the Dead, Ken Foray isn't the good guy, but Big Daddy's the bad guy and has the same kind of presence. It's like when he walks on screen, you pay attention, and this is supposedly a mindless zombie, but you stop what you're doing, and it's like, okay, this guy's here. This guy's here for, for some serious shit. And I thought that was interesting that he did that. But not to champion Land of the Dead, but I do see it as a quadrilogy. But back to Day of the Dead, the reason you and I picked it is because it's just a damn good movie.
How do you feel about the score to Day of the Dead? Because I know for a lot of people, it's sort of split down the middle. Some really enjoy it. Some are like, it's out of place. What do you feel about it?
It's an interesting question. It is a little bit out of place. I don't think it's enough out of place that it jars me. That it takes me out. But yeah, you're right. It's a little bit out of place, and I just get a kick out of the fact that the album was released with a love story single to it. The
From the end titles, yeah.
Yeah, it was the Something Behind Your Eyes or something like. I can't remember what the hell
the world inside your eyes. Yeah,
that's what it is. And it's just like, okay, was that even in the movie? And whether it is or not doesn't really matter because I didn't pay any freaking attention to it.
But there's something about that song, though it doesn't really connect with any of the characters. It just sort of encompasses that world, like the vibe of it in a weird way. And I think that's what John Harrison, who ultimately ended up being a director himself, when he composed that score, I think he was like, well, it's in Florida, it's in the Keys, it's in the Everglades and whatnot. I'll give it a almost Miami Vice-y sort of score. And I've always loved it myself. It's funny because, Callie's like, oh, you're here listening to that one song again. Yeah, it just really works for me. I think a lot of it works really great. And it definitely is very distinct to that movie. Just like Dawn's score is very distinct to its confines. And maybe that's why Land of the Dead still kind of rubs me the wrong way. It doesn't have a very distinct soundtrack. It seems very generic to me. Like there's not a recurrent theme at all that runs through the entire movie at all.
Right.
And maybe that would have saved it for me in a weird kind of way. Maybe if it had a different sort of soundtrack that seemed to fit the world that they had created.
Well, yeah, and when you consider that the original, that Night of the Living Dead had a library soundtrack to it, yet it seems to work. The fact that you don't think Land of the Dead works says a lot.
Yeah. Well, that was Romero, one of his many talents. He was able to take even stock music and blend it with the imagery so well that you would have never known it wasn't meant for that source material.
Right. Absolutely.
And even the music he used in Dawn, there was a good bunch of it that was taken from library tracks, mall tracks, that type of thing.
Yep.
And it's really interesting to watch like the Argento version of the film, which is wall-to-wall Goblin.
Absolutely.
And it's missing some key elements
Yep.
of what Romero had used. Romero did a wonderful job. I don't think he was placating to Argento as the producer. He was like, no, I really like this particular Goblin track. This works here. But I really want the library track here.
Yep. I think we both offered up pretty damn good lists.
It was still hard though, man. It was so freaking hard.
It was. But
I was like, this is horrible.
Yeah, but isn't it great that yes, it's horrible, but isn't it great that it is? I mean, that it's that difficult, because we've got stuff that means something to us, yet it was supposed to be a throwaway sequel. It was just supposed to be a money grab.
I know we're trying to make this one shorter and everything, so I only get the one honorable mention this time. And I had to keep shifting them all the way up to the point we were about to record. So honorable mention. Oh, you still have yours.
I think Callie has something that she'd like to contribute.
Yes.
This is Orca 2. No Orca 2.
No Orca 2.
Thank God.
Funny enough, though, it is a sea creature. It's Jaws 2.
Really?
That's a good choice.
Yes.
That's a very good choice. That was one of mine that I kept shifting around.
Absolutely.
You know what's funny about Jaws 2? Is that as a kid, I kept watching Jaws 1 and 2 on cable, and they would, for some reason, always show them back to back. So for the longest time, they just kind of melded into one giant movie for me.
Yeah.
So I was like, is this part 1 or is this part 2? Which is... No, this happens in part 2. Why am I watching this?
And to me, not to cut you off, but to me, it's the same thing as Halloween 2. It's a genius first movie and a really good adventure movie as the sequel. And I think if it tried to be as artsy as the first one, it would have failed. So I agree with you completely, but please go ahead. I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, I want to know what our moderator thinks of it.
That's what. Yeah, I was talking to her, Rick.
Looking at me, I saw you. Okay.
No, Jaws 2 is just one of those movies. Rick actually went ahead and kind of took most of what I was going to say. It's the same thing. I only ever watched it on cable. So they would always do the double features, Jaws and Jaws 2. So I never really knew that there wasn't a Jaws 2 until I was older. And it was like, oh, it's not one big ass movie. Okay. This is actually a sequel. And when I did find that out, I was able to watch it separately and then gauge it on its own. And I'm like, this is actually really good.
Yeah.
I was shocked that Roy did not want to come back for the sequel. But like a boss, he came in and he's just like, you know what? I'm a professional. I'm going to get this done. You won't be able to tell that
And he
I'm
killed
not
it.
having the best time. Yes, yes. That's the thing that I love about it, is that he absolutely sells it. And that's why I love it. It's a great sequel.
I could not agree more. It's a perfect entry.
And speaking of Jaws 2, our listeners and viewers may be interested in knowing that we're going to be interviewing John Hancock, who directed Prancer, Let's Scare Jessica to Death, quite a few genre films. He was the original director for Jaws 2. And we're going to be talking to him, and I really look forward to that conversation because he was canned by Universal, apparently because his version was too dark. So I'd really like to know what he was going to do with that film.
Me too. I'm psyched for that. And
so do you have an honorable mention there, boss man?
Yeah, I do. Mine is, and I, excuse me for the bad cover, but mine's Fright Night 2. Most a good portion of the cast comes back for Fright Night 2. They make me feel good, just like they did in the first one. And anything to want see Roddy McDowell again, you know. I just really like the movie. It's not the first one, but boy, I really like the second one. So that's my choice.
I'm happy you picked that, actually, because that was the one I pared it down to. Actually, out of all my honorable mentions, Fright Night 2 was it. So I'm glad you chose that one because I get to talk about the one that I threw away. But yeah, Fright Night 2, yeah, does it stand right here with the original? No, but it's so fun
It
to
is.
see the characters come back, and it's not unbelievable what they're going through. Charlie's trying to have a normal life. He's got a new girlfriend. Everything's going great, and then great vampires show up again.
Yep.
And it's just Regina Carmen. Oh my goodness! When I was a teenage boy seeing that movie, I was in love with that chick. And I remember telling my mom about the movie, and she's like, "That's the stupidest thing I ever heard. You know, why couldn't they bring Chris Sarandon back?" I'm like, "Because he's dead. That's why.
Yeah,
it's his sister. It makes perfect sense. It's Jerry's sister.
He's dead."
I said, you watch soap operas where dead people come back all the time, or somebody's sister comes into things. What's the big deal?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Tommy Lee Wallace, I think, does a bang-up job directing it.
Yes.
It's interesting because he only made a handful of films. They do have a Carpenter-like feel to it, which makes sense considering they went to film school together and worked together so much. And it really works. You know, that type of imagery. It's different than Tom Holland's direction. And it just gives it a whole new atmosphere because now you're in the apartment complex. You have a whole new series of characters on the villain side. You know, this little werewolf guy. You have all these familiars and everything. It's really fun.
I completely agree, and I just think it's great that we both arrived at that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great minds think alike, and and I'm just gonna throw it out there. I could have went with Halloween 3, but everyone knows that one. I could have went for Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, which my bud here, my compadre, and I have debated for hours on end because he's not a fan. I went ahead and decided Doctor Sleep. I think is a really underappreciated film.
Yep.
It's a movie that people watch now and they're like, "Oh, it's such a great movie." Then where were you the day it came out?
Exactly.
Because that movie bombed miserably.
Yes,
it did so horrible that it put director Mike Flanagan into the director's jail for a little bit. Like, no, you're not going to get to do another big movie for a while. You did bad. And what a feat to be able to be a sequel to both the book and the movie and do it respectfully towards both, to the point where Stephen King even said it's pretty damn good, and what you pulled off is amazing.
Right.
Ewan McGregor, it's probably one of his best performances, I think. You know, probably since Train Spotting. He's believable. You feel for him and everything he's going through. The young girl who plays Abra is great. You know, I would want to see a whole movie about her and her family. You know, that's how good her performance is. And Rose the Hat, Rebecca Ferguson, yeah, suck my soul, you're fine, do what you need to have such an incredibly scary performance out of a drop dead gorgeous woman is insane to me. How they were able to balance that. And the violence, how it got an R rating when they kill that kid. I was like, how did this get Wes Craven used to have his ass handed to him all the time. Like, you insult us with this cut of your movie, cut it down. But somehow Flanagan was able to keep it in there, and it's one of the most disturbing sequences in a Hollywood studio produced film of the last decade. Easily.
Right. And I like this movie pretty much beginning to end, where with The Shining, I still have the biggest love-hate relationship with The Shining. There are parts of it that I absolutely love, but man, there are parts of it where it's like I can't. So so to make a sequel to that and get it right, especially as right as they got Dr. Sleep, man, kudos, because that I think lesser people would have screwed that up too.
And it was interesting because we had that cool, I don't believe it was the same year, so it was probably within 2 years of one another. Not only did we have this kind of rekindling of love for The Shining through the Dr. Sleep sequel, but then in Ready Player One, there's the entire sequence where they go into the Shining Hotel. Yep. And I didn't know that scene was coming up when we saw Ready Player One in the theater. So once I realized they were doing it, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is great. So It's cool to see that much love for an older horror film, within such a short interval of one another.
Absolutely. Well, I don't know. Does that do it for our likes? Because I'm impressed. Yeah. I'm impressed with both lists, even though, of course, I made one of them. I don't mean to have it sound like that, but I'm impressed that in these two lists and with Callie's Jaws too, we've got a solid group of movies that if you at home didn't see these movies, you need to.
Yeah, have a nice little film festival over a weekend or something with friends and family who enjoy these type of movies. And yeah, I think you'd have a solid time with it.
And you can thank
I don't
us.
think there's any of them in the bunch that, to throw it away would be silly, No, keep these. These are good choices.
Absolutely. I'm proud of what we did in the show.
Rich, take it away.
So there you have it. You have a lot to work with. Go home, watch some stuff, have fun, and know that we put this together because we really like these flicks, and at times we kind of know what we're talking about. So,
and we've talked about the good, and our next episode is going to be the bad, the really bad.
And you should tune in for that.
Almost as fun.
Thanks for joining us, Rich.
Bye.
So, I was really thinking about sequels over the decades and the really incredible.
Oh, sorry. Looks like you're gone. Yeah.
No, I'm right here. Thanks. I can hear you.
Thanks for joining us, guys. We really appreciate you hanging out with us. Next
time,
I
hear you.
Check us out
I see you.
On Sequels, Volume 2, the Dislikes list. Bye.